This is a retrospective of the work of Bonnie McComb Crye. My name is Don Crye. Bonnie was my husband, or my wife. Bonnie was diagnosed with colon cancer in the spring of 2012, and she passed away in the summer of 2013. In the spring of that year, 2013, she had a show at the same gallery of her abstract work, her first solo show, which was really exciting for her and exciting for the people who saw it. It was great. So when she passed away, my two daughters and I, Sarah Marcotte and Zoe Crye, decided that we would try and show her work in some way. So the opportunity came up to use the same gallery. And it's just about 2 years since she had her solo show. So what we've done is collect work from the entirety of her artistic career. She was trained as a studio potter in the mid-60s in Calgary at the Alberta College of Art and Design, and then worked as an instructor and a functional potter through the 70s, a studio potter. In the 80s, she began doing porcelain work. She went back to Alberta College of Art and Design in the mid-80s or in the mid-70s, and learned how to do porcelain casting. And so she began then through the late 70s and 80s doing porcelain work as well. Around the year 2000 or so, she began painting. So the paintings, all of the paintings in this show are from 2002 through to 2013. There are a couple of mandalas which she worked at to begin with, and then she worked in acrylic on canvas doing landscapes. There's several of those pieces here, and then she worked primarily in abstract from 2009 onward. She studied with Brian Simons, a local painter, and later with Bill Porteous doing landscape, and then abstractions. What we tried to do in the show is, because the work is diverse, we didn't want to do it chronologically. So we tried to cluster groups of objects, ceramics and paintings that kind of were either thematic or aesthetically pleasing. And so in looking at the show, you get a sense of the continuity of design and interest and curiosity that she had for materials over the span of her artistic career. Let me see, where can I go from here? Okay, maybe I'll talk about the painting more than anything. In 2002, Bonnie began studying with Madeline Shields, who was a student of Jack Wise, and there was a process of journaling and meditation which led to mandala design. Each one of the mandalas that we'll show later took almost a year to do, so they're very involved, and they're gouache on paper. The landscapes and most of her work was inspired by the prairies and by her childhood in growing up in Alberta. So those themes, the kind of impetus, the motivation, and the aesthetic comes from those big spaces and those kind of patterns. And so you can see in both her abstract and her landscape, there's that kind of thing happening. She worked at landscape, and I think probably 3 or 4 years, and found herself not happy with, she wanted more immediacy. And so in working with Bill Porteous, she began using materials on Stonehenge and Terraskin paper, using scraping, palette knives, and different sort of implements to move and manipulate the acrylics on that. And she found that very satisfying, very demanding, and really exciting. So the work over the 3 or 4 years she did that, there were a number of different series, and we tried to collect and show a kind of a representation of those sorts of, okay, and I don't know if I can say an awful lot else. So just maybe I'll say this now. In part of the purpose of this show, probably half the pieces are for sale, and we have a number, actually quite a few pieces that are still in our studio that we'll sell if people are interested. And the other works are either owned by us or we borrow them from people. The funds that we raise from this show will be put towards a studio residency program for an emerging artist. So her studio will be, which is at our house, we'll clean it out, and then we'll offer 3 or 4 month studio residency for an artist who needs that space. And we're going to partner with a local art school to find candidates, and then also we'll offer a show at the end of that. So the money from this will go towards supporting artists in Victoria and supporting that studio project that we have lined up. So we're hoping to kind of continue Bonnie's name through selling our art, and then also through the residency program. These are some of the earliest pieces that we have, and I think like many functional potters from the 60s and 70s who were making a living from selling their pots, there aren't that many of them around that we have. Somehow in our house there weren't an awful lot of them. So we had this vase, which is an early stoneware example from 1970, a small cup, a small tea bowl, and then a plate. The ceramics and the stoneware come out of the Leach Hamada tradition, and which was really current. And the instructors that she had, particularly Walter Drohan, who was a mentor of hers at ACAD, was influential. So I think probably these are typical of the glaze types and the forms that were prominent in those times. But these are, well, 1970, so they're 45 years old. They've been used. They're still here, so they'll be around for a long time. The representational pieces that we have on the wall here are from the sort of 2005 through 2009. This is called Sea Spray Winchelsea Island. So from a holiday we took on Winchelsea Island, the Land Conservancy owns the islands, and there's a cabin. We spent several holidays there. And this was a little later, 2009. These are poplar trees in Alberta, from near where Bonnie's mother grew up. And you can see the underpainting. This is a kind of signature, I think, of Brian's instruction, and that was influenced quite a bit by his style and design. Okay. And we can move over here. We have a lot of bisqued porcelain. So these were cast pieces that were bisqued, and the glazing didn't get resolved. So we ended up with a lot of pieces like this, which are extremely delicate, but really, really beautiful on their own, just as beautiful objects. So even though they're delicate, we thought that they were beautiful to show, and that if people would like to buy these as well, that I have enough of them that I'm happy to do that. She concentrated on particular fineness, so you can see just the delicacy of the porcelain and the thinness of it. This is the mother from a mold that she made out of plaster. So just as an object itself, it's really beautiful, and it kind of gives a continuity or a sense of the process of producing this kind of work. And these are hand-built objects, just in white porcelain, that they were on the way to something, but didn't get finished. But still, they're really lovely pieces on their own. So we thought we would include those in the show. They seem to fit well with the kind of spareness, and were among her very last works, so 2013. And this is Tarascon paper, which has a very fluid and a very smooth surface, so the acrylic moves really nicely on it. And as she continued to work at abstraction, her paintings became more and more spare. So she felt she had the confidence to let the small amount of paint speak for itself. Okay, so we thought that these pieces worked well with that kind of simplicity. We have the same porcelain objects which have been glazed, and these vases, and other pieces as well, but these vases were really amenable to manipulation after the casting. So the rim was put on here, applications here, there's some cutouts and that sort of thing. So it was really a chance for her to look at decoration and design. And again, they weren't particularly functional, so she had a lot of latitude in doing that. And these were the mandalas that I spoke of earlier. The process involved each particular design feature on the mandala has, there's a question that's asked and a kind of meditation and consideration that goes into the symbolism and design of each of those. So these pieces, this one is called Sophie's Journey, which was written during the time that our friend's elderly mother was ill, and so spoke to Bonnie about Sophie, the mother's life journey, which had been exceptionally interesting and long. And this is called The Four Seasons, which I think is much more personal, and it has small drawings in gouache of particularly dreams sequences that were important in this. So because it evolved over a long time, there's a chance to consider dreams and to include them thematically in the mandala. And I think I don't know the symbolic details and the process so much. She journaled all of this, so this is something that we'll get a chance to look at as we look at her journals. She, like many artists, kept pretty detailed journals and sketchbooks right through 40 or 45 years of her artistic life. So there's a lot there, a lot of rich things for us. And we can move over to this corner as well. These are more of the porcelain objects. This is one in particular that has a more sculptural element. And I think in the 80s there was a kind of revival of really highly designed porcelain work, and so she was influenced quite a bit by that. And these were just kind of lovely objects we found that were in the studio, and they kind of nested really nicely. And I think the act of manipulation and working with your hands. If you train as a potter, there's an attraction there to begin with, I'm sure, and that kind of physicality of that kind of training, I think, is evident through a lot of her artistic career. So you can see that in these particular pieces. This is from her graduation project, I think, from art college, and had a glaze that she worked really hard at getting. So this was a significant and really in remarkably great shape for being that old. And these pieces here would be 2012. And again, there's a real physicality with the abstract work. So the movement of the paint on the surface was important. The materials, the knives, and the closeness of the hand to the actual painting, I think, was something that really appealed to her and was gratifying, and also, allowed her to, I think, to produce things that were really successful. So, and this would be a little later, and I think you can see the confidence and more sophistication in her layering of materials, and the sparseness of the piece, so that just the movement and the different textures and lights on that really speak for itself. She didn't feel that she had to develop a really big focus or have the piece kind of more subtle, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and I think really successful. This is my particular favorite. I'll keep it. Okay. All right, and we can maybe move. There's some smaller pieces here, and I think with this banding could be seen in the previous works as well, and I think it's difficult, and her teacher, her instructor, Bill, said this is very difficult to do that because you end up mimicking a frame or a window, and so the viewer has a sort of preconceived idea of what's supposed to be seen there. And so it takes a subtlety, I think, in the connection and the contrast between the geometric shapes here. So this one we liked really a lot as well, because I think it's much more subtle as well, and it's not bright, it's not flashy, but there's a kind of sense of it that really really settles with you. So we like this piece really a lot. And this is one that was really kinetic. So it's very, very different than the piece that we just looked at. But there's a kind of vigor and energy that shows a sort of range of her experimentation. And this as well as on Terra Skins, so there's a kind of liveliness to the movement of the paint there. And this piece we included. Bonnie spent, she had a scholarship for a 4-month residency at the Banff Center in the ceramics program in 1986. And she worked a lot with casserole and in open forms. And at the end, this came from the graduate show, at the end she had pieces she was happy with, but not pieces that she felt were really finished and resolved. And so the experience of being at Banff was so influential and so powerful for her as well, having growing up in that area and returning to it, spending time with international potters and that important exchange, that she wanted to find something that kind of symbolized Banff as much as anything. And so she found the sod that at that time of the year was just disappearing. And this plate in a tourist shop, and again, thousands of tourists in Banff, and this kind of kitschy plate that says something about the change in Banff over the years and the kind of life and lifestyle there. So that was, and as well, that summer there were a lot of artists doing earthwork, so it was a big part of that summer. And I think maybe the grass was a kind of reference to that sort of thing as well. Okay, and then we just have a few more pieces in the other part here. And I'll maybe look at these representational pieces first. This is Peggy's Cove, so there have to be thousands and thousands of paintings of Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia. But she liked a particular perspective, and I think there's kind of in the depth and perspective, there's a kind of a bit of naivety that she may be influenced by the sort of the kind of folk art that we looked at a lot during that time. And so I think that somewhere in there she was influenced by that. So this is also a piece that we liked a lot. And the next piece over in the summer of 2009, we spent a month in Scotland, and this just came from a photo that we took. And I think it has, I mean, it has significance emotionally in many ways. Her family's heritage is Scottish, and there was a kind of kinship with that very kind of harsh and difficult landscape sometimes. And I think the ocean looks really attractive, and it wasn't. It was really cold. So this, and the boats themselves, I think this one is abandoned, and there's a kind of, you know, a kind of lesson there about how that life has changed. I don't know if we looked at this one as well, or if we can. Yeah. So there are three pieces here from these were, she called a swath. That was the title of these pieces, and I think she was just working with bands of color and really getting a sense of not so much the material, but just the colors and how they worked, and how this kind of design features. Because I think when you come from a craft-based discipline, there's a kind of a kind of traditional, rigid sense of design, and the impulse, I think, is to begin to make it pretty. And so these are beautiful, but I think maybe she found a fine edge between being decorative and actually sort of saying and conveying something. And so, you know, these pieces were, I think, maybe the ones that did that the best. And then there are these smaller pieces that, again, are a little more pastel and not as punchy as the previous one. But there's a kind of casualness, just the running of the paint and a bit of splatters here, that she, I think, allowed her to loosen up and to move into other things as well. So it's taking the sort of tight design and maybe trying to loosen it up. These pieces were part of that. So I think we got everything. And so it's for my daughters and I. This has been really a journey, a kind of an homage to their mom and to my wife, and a chance for us to look at the value that we place in the objects that we surround ourselves with, and the value of art when the story has changed, when the artist is gone. So what meaning do these have now? How do we carry that meaning forward? How does that story continue when these are hung in other people's houses? So for us, it's been a huge learning experience, and really cathartic in lots of ways, but also really a chance to spend a lot of time with the materials that someone we love touched.